Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 168 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix. Please send your questions to ask@nonmonogamyhelp.com, and they'll either be in the podcast or the column anonymously. You're more than welcome to let me know which one you prefer. If you want to read the columns and listen to all the podcasts, you can find everything at nonmonogamy.help. Sign up to the early emails that you get on Wednesdays at nonmonogamy.com/email. And you can follow the podcast on Instagram at non-monogamyhelp and on TikTok at non-monohelp. And if you want to join the podcast shoutout support tier, that's always really appreciated, or any tier. There's a couple of paid tiers at nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe. And I'll read your name with your permission at the end of the podcast. If this is your first time hearing this, we're going to get to the discussion question. I forgot to say that. I'm going to put forth a question that you can use to get to know your friends, partners, anyone else a little bit better. I also answer it myself briefly to give you a little bit of context. This week's discussion question is an Otter Being polyamory conversation card question. They're really cool cards, and they've really helped me out with lots of episodes coming up with discussion questions that are actually polyamory related rather than being general. You can get the cards at nonmonogamyhelp.com/cards, and you can get 10% off using non-monohelp at checkout. So this is the first discussion. Well, there's only one discussion question. What am I talking about? Anyway, the discussion question is, do you prioritize any of your relationships over your other relationships? And if so, in what way? I am more or less a relationship anarchist. So no, I try not to prioritize relationships in a theoretical sense over any other relationships. I think that sometimes when needs must, there might be situations where I have to prioritize something, like if I have a friend who's going through something really difficult and they really, really need my support, then I will probably prioritize spending time with them over other people just because they need my support, things like that. So if there are needs that I really want to meet or people that are having a difficult time, or for any reason that, if I suddenly, I don't know how this would happen, but if I suddenly became, a parent or if I was in charge of a child, then that child would be the absolute priority. So at present, not knowingly, but it just depends on what goes down. But I'm not going to prioritize something based off of sort of cultural dictates of romantic relationships should be prioritized over any other relationship or anything like that. I don't personally believe in that. That is not what I want to do. So yeah, here's the discussion question again. Do you prioritize any of your relationships over your other relationships? And if so, in what way? Let's get to this week's question.
Hi, I'm the person that sent in the question about negative feelings towards a meta today. I watched your videos, and yes, there was not room for detail, and everything you've said I've done, and I'm able to separate out the things that are my partner's choices. But at the same time, I haven't met this meta because there's been so many things that have happened. And yes, most of them were my partner's decisions. But some of them, there are some actions that she's taken that I have had a problem with. And the interactions we've had via text and all that stuff, I haven't felt very good about the way she responded to me one time when I told her I was really struggling with the things that our partner was doing and stuff like that. I didn't like how she responded. I feel like she has, just done some things that aren't necessarily good, and I want to meet her because we're trying for kitchen table, but I just have all these hang-ups and I'm having a really difficult time trying to figure out how to navigate that.
Before we get to this week's answer, I want to quickly remind you of this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. Often in my columns and podcasts, I encourage people to seek a polyamory-friendly therapist, and for a lot of people, finding a therapist locally who understands polyamory is really, really difficult. impossible maybe for some people or even out of their budget, BetterHelp allows you to find therapists online that you can send messages to at any time of the day, and they do also offer some financial aid. You can get 10% off your first month by using the promo code Non-Monogamy Help at checkout or going to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy help. Let's get to this week's answer. So I can't remember what I said in my video. If anyone's listening to this and isn't sure what this person is referring to, I do Q&As on my Instagram at non-monogamy help, and people ask questions. And of course, the question box on Instagram is extremely tiny, and it's impossible for people to put in much context. And I do them quite frequently, so I don't specifically remember which question yours would have been. However, I think the thing that sticks out for me here, and it's kind of hard because, yes, this is more information, but I don't necessarily know what the things that she has done that aren't necessarily good are. And so it's kind of a little bit difficult for me to give a full response because, not to say anything negative of yourself, but there are things that are explainable. There are things that, you absolutely shouldn't tolerate. There are things I wouldn't tolerate. So it's really hard for me to know exactly what's going on here. I think the bigger question for me is, does your meta actually want kitchen table polyamory? Because you said we are trying for kitchen table, but who is we? Is that you and your partner? Is that you, your partner, and your meta? It kind of feels like your partner has not actually been hinging here. Like, it's not to say necessarily that you and your metamor shouldn't talk or text or anything like that, but I just feel like if I were going to try for kitchen table polyamory and if I were going to be the hinge in the situation, I definitely think that I would try to direct that. Like, I would be the intermediate, like before, unless you already knew each other beforehand and were talking beforehand, I think I would have made that super clear to the meta. I'm not quite sure like how long you've been with your partner, how long the meta's been with your partner, if you live with your meta or if you live with your partner. If your partner lives with your meta, like all of these things have an impact on how this situation can be introduced. But I'd say that I would definitely take the active hand in having you two meet up, talking through things, making it super clear that, if you want kitchen table, making it super clear what kind of kitchen table, like how does this work? Like, do you have a maximum number of partners? Are there more people joining in this kitchen table? Like, there's a million different ways you could do kitchen table polyamory. You could have a situation where, what if you start dating someone and you want to bring that person into the household? Like, there's so many things to discuss. And I kind of feel like if I were the first hinge, more or less, then I would be the one doing a lot of that emotional labor, more or less. Like, I don't know if it's called emotional labor, but I would be doing a lot of the discussion, the negotiating, the talking through things. And the fact that you're talking with your meta as well, you said, you don't feel very good about the way she responded to you when you told her that you were struggling with the things that your partner was doing. So a couple of things on that. Firstly, I think that your metas are terrible, terrible people to go to. It makes sense. Like, I'm not trying to say it doesn't make sense that you went to her to talk about it, especially if you feel like, am I going crazy? Am I being too sensitive? Oh, I know this other person who's also dating my partner. I'll ask them if they're having the same experience. Like, it makes total sense. I'm not trying to dog on you for doing that. However, I do genuinely think that metamors are terrible people to go to with that type of question or that type of concern in most cases. And that's just because they're not an objective third party. And it can be really, really awkward to give someone advice about a person that you both date. And it can feel a little bit like you're talking about your partner behind their back. And it's also may not be stuff that they want to know, even in a kitchen table situation. I just feel like what's going on in your separate relationship should probably not like completely stay between you. And again, like I totally understand reaching out. And I think some questions are okay. It really depends on what you were asking. But I just feel like if there are problems in between, if there should be a forum where all three of you sit down. If you're doing kitchen table and that's really what you want, I feel like there should be a relationship, like as multi-amory kind of calls the radar, like there should be a check-in with all three of you where you can raise stuff like that as a team rather than necessarily like going behind it. I mean, I'm not saying you're intentionally trying to do this, but it just, I can understand depending on how she responded. Like you said, you don't feel very good about how she responded. I think I would be quite frustrated with somebody. Like, I think I tried to respond gently, and I think I would definitely say, like, look, I totally understand that you're feeling this way, but I'm really not the best person to talk to about this. And I know that's super difficult because monogamous people, like, they have friends that they can talk to about their relationships. It's one of the main reasons why people who are abusing people try to isolate them away from their friends and family, because your friends are the people you talk to about your relationships, that your friends can give you that sense check. Your friends can tell you, like, oh my God, this person is treating you terribly, dude. And so you want that sense check, and it makes sense to want that from a meta. I think, again, there are right and wrong ways to go about it. I don't think it's like never discuss your other relationships with you. I'm not saying it that strongly, but I just think that if it's about emotional support, I really don't know is that the meta is the best person to go to about that. I think it can put them in a really awkward position. Similar to, like, if you have a friend and if you have two friends who date each other and you go to the other friend, like one friend, because of the friendship between it makes sense, but like it can put that person in a really awkward position. So I can understand why that might not have been such a great experience for your metamor. But again, there's a lot of vagueness about this, or there isn't a lot of explanation of what she's done that hasn't been good. So, it's not that I'm saying that whenever there's a problem with a metamor, it's always the partner that's the problem. There may very well be points when she's been a total dick. And so it's hard to say, but I do think that it does sound like your partner's not hinging very well here, because I just feel like if you're really trying for kitchen table, your partner should really be spearheading that transition. Your partner should really be the one to introduce you guys to each other, to talk through things. Like, you all three should be talking about your shared goals and talking about this kitchen table, rather than, you two. I'm assuming from what's described. I don't necessarily, I don't remember everything that happened on Instagram, so deep apologies for that. But B, I also can't tell from this. I'm assuming that you and your partner were dating before your partner met this meta, but it's hard to say. And if it's a situation where you and your partner were dating and you're trying to, like, not saying you're doing this, but trying to, like, invite a third in, then definitely your partner should be more active. And it doesn't sound like from your question that your partner is very active in this. So I really think, like, first steps I would take is go to my partner and be like, look, does Meta actually want kitchen table polyamory? Have you talked about this? Have you and your partner talked about your ideals? What kind of kitchen table polyamory do you guys want? Are you on the same page as that? And I would really go through, like, what are those things, the things you were struggling with that your partner was doing, and bring it up with your partner and say, look, I might be overacting. I might be a little bit upset, but these are some of the things that I've been struggling with. And I would really like to address them before we go forward with this kitchen table situation. Like, make sure that you're on the same page. Because I think that, a lot of this stuff, it depends. I don't know what it means when you say that, she's done some things that aren't necessarily good. Like, what does that can mean? Anything. And people, you would be surprised about the stuff that people can say, oh, that's kind of bad, and that's really bad. And then sometimes people say something is really bad and it's not been good for them, but it's not been completely, out of the box of what the other person might do in that situation, right? So it depends on what that is, and if you want to email me and follow up with that, I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, I think the first port of call is your partner, and to be like, are we on the same page about what kitchen table polyamory means? Are we on the same page to know how we want other people to fit in your life? Because let's say, everything goes fine with this meta. All the problems just water under a bridge, blah, blah, blah. But then you meet somebody and you want to move them into the household. If you've never discussed that before, then that could be another thing. So, like, make sure that you and your partner are crystal clear about what it is that you want to do, and that all three of you are crystal clear about what this kitchen table looks like and what it means to have kitchen table polyamory, and that you all want it. And if you are on the same page, then, work as a team together and really make your partner, you can't make your partner do anything. What the fuck am I saying? You invite your partner to step up a little bit more in this hinging situation and have some type of regular check-ins with each other so that you don't have to go to your meta about problems that are going on in relationships, where you can actually address things as a 3-person group. I'm not saying you're necessarily a triad, but if you're going for kitchen table polyamory, then you are trying to be a family, essentially. And so you should have family meetings And you should be speaking to your partner and have a regular check-in with your partner about the stuff that comes up in between you. And your partner should be regularly checking in with the meta about what's going on between them. So these are things that your partner really needs to do. And I see sometimes a lot of the cases, like this happens a lot, where two metas end up kind of emotionally managing the relationship because a hinge doesn't step up. A hinge is usually a man. But it's not always the case. But it happens all the effing time. And I'm tired and bedraggled on behalf of the people who write into me and also the people I've seen in so many cases of this, where it's just like the hinge is not hinging. And then the two metas have to like negotiate with each other. Like like the freaking hinge is a hostage. It becomes a hostage situation instead of a hinge situation, and not even a hostage situation, because it's just the fact that the hinge is not stepping up and is not doing any kind of management of anything. It's just going like, okay, I guess you guys figure it out. And it's just, I have very, very little sympathy. But I don't necessarily know what's going on in this situation. But I don't think my advice would have changed that much from the video that I put up on Instagram, where it's easy to blame the metamor. And I'm not saying that your metamor is an angel and has never done anything wrong. But primarily, even if you want kitchen table, I think you need to go to your partner as a first port of call. And I think also, like, depending, again, I don't know what it means that she's done some things that aren't necessarily good. I mean, if she's violated your personal boundaries, if she's hit you, then don't talk to her. Like, that could mean anything. So it's hard for me to say. But yeah, first port of call would probably be my partner. If, sometimes people don't get along. So, like, even if you are all on the same page, maybe you just don't get along with her. Sometimes adults just don't get along, just not each other's vibe, whatever. And then you might have to think if kitchen table is really realistic, because sometimes I do think that unless you're a person who's like totally fine with living in a household of people that you kind of don't really like that much, and maybe that's not a big deal for people, then maybe that works. But sometimes I just think that adults don't get along. And I think we got to be realistic. I think as nice as kitchen table sounds, it sounds so lovely to have this co-op with all these people that are so awesome, and then you don't have to drive anywhere to meet up with anybody. Sounds like my personal nightmare. But if it's something that you want, that's fine. But I just think sometimes people don't get along, and I think you just got to be realistic about that. So yeah, overall, I think my first port of call would be the partner and figuring out if you're on the same page, and then see where you can go from there. You don't have to meet up right away. There's no deadline. You've got plenty of time. Nobody in the situation, from what I can gather, has an illness or a situation where they absolutely needs to be rushed. So take your time, figure stuff out with your partner first, and then you'll be a lot more secure about what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, I hope that helps, and good luck. Thank you for listening to... I forgot the episode number. Thank you for listening to episode 168 of Non-Monogamy Help. If you want to be awesome, you can sign up to the website, or sign up. You can sign up on the website to support this column and podcast. So this is the podcast, but I also have a column. That's right. I have a column at nonmonogamyhelp.com, which has stuff in it that you don't get on the podcast, so you should totally subscribe. If you subscribe for free, then you'll get it in your inbox every Friday when it comes out, just like the podcast. Anyway, you can be an even more awesome person and be a podcast shoutout supporter if you go to nonmonogamyhelp.com/subscribe. My current podcast shoutout supporters are Army, Mike Kander, and Matios Caden. If for whatever reason you cannot support economically, you can subscribe on the free tier. You can sign up to the early emails that I send out on Wednesdays at nonmonogamyhelp.com/email. Blah, blah, blah. Take a screenshot of the podcast, rate and review it. And share it with all the people that you know, and tag all the accounts, and then I will repost your stuff and say thank you with like a little crying emoji, because I really, really appreciate all the support. And I think by the time this comes out as well, I do have a polyamory fundamentals course, which is really, really good. Polyamory fast track, polyamory fundamentals. If you're a little overwhelmed by all the reading that you have to do when you start on polyamory, then there are things that you can do right away. I've talked about the polyamory PhD. I think reading is good. I wrote books. It would be stupid of me to say not to read. But all of the books that are usually recommended for people who are starting out polyamory, that's like 1,700 pages to read, 45 to 55 hours of reading, which a lot of people really, really struggle to do, and not every single option has an audiobook. So if you would like an audio-based self-paced course starting out in the fundamentals of polyamory, like has lots of exercises that you can do right away rather than waiting, because I genuinely think that waiting and getting your polyamory PhD is not helpful. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to polyamoryfasttrack.com and you can get signed up for the course. So yeah, that's all for this week. You will get a new podcast episode in a fortnight and a new column next Friday. Thank you so much for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. The music was done by Chris Albury Jones at albury-jones.com. Thank you for listening.